Greetings and welcome to Enigmatic. Let's try to keep some momentum going, keep sharing, keep exploring, and keep mindfully not giving a fuck. So I'm gonna put that as the caveat to me not giving a fuck. Because it's not that I actually don't give a fuck at all. I'm not talking about apathy, right? I'm talking about like not giving a fuck in the ways that only serve to deter me, get in my way, hinder, or don't serve me, right? Because it's not like I'm just gonna default all my scruples because I'm not giving a fuck right now. That sets me up to be a hypocrite, and that's one thing I still give a shit about. Hypocrisy drives me up the wall, and it's everywhere. Um, Hypocrisy is one of those things that shows me how self-aware an individual is. Because oftentimes people are hypocrites based on their own subjective bias in favor of themselves or their um, motives or intents. It's interesting to observe. It's like somebody will cast a rule when they're not involved in the situation, like when they don't have to abide by it. They'll make sure, or when they are abiding by it. But as soon as it's inconvenient for them, they'll find a reason in which there's an exception for that rule. Now, that's not to say there's no nuance in every situation. This is one of the reasons why I treat things contextually. But if we were to create an analogy out of, certain situations, we could see that there is enough isomorphic mapping from one analogy to another to show that this person's a hypocrite and they're going against their own mandates, right? That's not what I wanted to talk about, though. I wanted to talk about not giving a fuck and psychedelics, right? I've had a lot of anxiety and struggle with psychedelics over the past maybe 5 years or so, just with regards to how deep that I go. And in this point in time, I'm thankful for everything that I've been through because it's brought me to a very sturdy point and a very grounded point with psychedelics. But all the same, I still find myself experiencing some trepidation with regards to how deep that I want to go. And some of that has, it's a multifaceted situation, right? We're looking at this orb almost, and the orb isn't perfectly spherical. It's actually tessellated in a very subtle way. And so we're looking at all these different facets. And when something is looking spherical but is faceted in such a way, that means that there's a lot of these different sides to see of the entire situation. So let's look at quality of experiences first before I move towards me, myself, and I. So in the past 5 years, my experiences have only gotten weirder. Okay, it's hard for me to find different things to map onto that have already been experienced by others or that can help me to make sense of some of the experiences that I've had. Right. So with a lot of people that do psychedelics, there is an appeal to mysticism and esotericism and other ways of looking at the world. So animism is a very, popular way of looking at the world. But there's a lot of ways in which my experiences have just become so alien that I'm not finding what's the word I'm looking for? Like I'm not finding the mirror to, whatever is here, right? But at the same time, with these highly alien experiences, I'm still sustained and fulfilled, and I'm getting what I need out of it. I was gonna say what I want, but it's more like I'm getting what I need out of it, and so that's something that I can also put into the basket of it's all okay. Is that while I might have started my psychedelic journey with pretty much only going extremely deep and not realizing that that's all I was doing. Now it's like I'm spending time in the shallower waters and in the preliminary areas that I somehow was lucky enough to skip over initially. It's almost like it's like I'm trying to figure out. It's being able to run before you can walk. And so now I'm just like walking. Right. Then there's been a lot of experiences that have just been fucking hard. And, that kind of comes with the territory when you do psychedelics, one solo, and two in a ceremonial and ritualistic type of way that just elicits more emotional and personal and, spiritual work when we do psychedelics in that way. And I'm fucking stubborn and I prefer to, just trip by myself and get myself through, right? That's what's meaningful to me. Because the thing about it is, like, I talk about how I haven't gone that deep in several years, and I could. All I have to do is ask for a sitter, but I'm stubborn, so I don't ask for a sitter. I want to get myself there, and I want to get myself through, and that's a trauma response, right? I felt that I had to do that growing up, and I felt disappointed by so many people that there's trust issues, and with trust issues are correlates of not wanting to have to rely on anybody. Anybody could, everything is fleeting, right? Including the people that we trust. And so that's a trauma response to, I need to do this all on my own and get there on my own. Um, Now I can acknowledge that and I can say that, but it's like, when am I gonna, schedule a time with a sitter, which I have plenty of people to ask to be a sitter for me. When am I gonna actually do that? I don't know. I don't know if I will. I don't know if I'll actually ask for that. I could see myself going the distance with, a friend, and, like, just because we happen to be, say, smoking changa together. But yeah, me asking for help has been a very, very hard thing, and something I'm trying to learn better right now. And one of the things that is attached to that is learning how to receive, right? So my ADHD brain likes to bounce all over the place just because everything's connected, and you can see, like, these connections even if they seem disparate. And so the other thing that comes up, and I've been given a fuck less about this, and this is kind of where I've been moving towards, is that with these hard experiences that I've had and the lack of uplifting experiences, I guess you could say, and not acknowledging their impacts, one of the things that has been able to gain strength and power over me internally is a sense of doubt. There's doubt every time now. Now, granted, doubt comes about when something bad happens. I'd done psychedelics for so long and never really had any huge issues, and started having these really, really hard experiences. So then the doubt comes up, and I never really addressed it very well. And I really, really have to, because I have to decouple my doubt with regards to my actions in my life and in the world from the application of my skepticism to myself. Because when we develop a system, the system shouldn't be an exception to itself. And so, with me being so skeptical, that translates to my interactions with myself personally, right? So now I'm on a kind of a psychedelic break right now. I go through, periods where, I might have some heavy use, and then I'll fast for a while. Because that's how we keep our heads on straight. If you're ending up in the space that is outside of consensus reality, then you yourself will end up outside of consensus reality. And that's something I'm trying to prevent. So mindfully not giving a fuck, when I decide that I'm going to go back into it, which is probably going to be next week or so, I'm just going to rip this bowl, like, usually I take these, little timid, hits. And, now that I'm bringing that up, the other thing too about it, especially with DMT in particular, you hear people talk about entities and other minds and all these other things that are potentially going on in this space. Like, it is a true mystery. And, oh, I'm so sorry. I completely lost my way. This discussion, this talk right now is just, like, bringing up so much for me right now. But what I was getting at is that sometimes DMT just takes you. So I weigh all my doses. And there's been times where I've done under 10 milligrams and it is extremely visual. And I'm like, why am I seeing anything? And why are there entities like all up in my face right now? So that's another reason why I get nervous, because I have no idea what is really going to happen, even if I, dose appropriately. So it's like maybe with like some of this trepidation that, I have, well, I'm giving myself such a hard time about it. And it's like, no, like I should be commending myself. Yeah, I don't go as deep as I want to, or I feel I ought to, quote unquote, but I'm sticking with it and I'm still going at it. It's not like I've given up, you know, and the fact of the matter is, the shit is objectively scary. And if somebody wants to disagree with me about that, that's fine. It probably just hasn't gotten real for them yet. One thing I have to tell people all the time is like at some point it gets real. It's not sunshine and rainbows anymore. And I've been past that point for a long time. And so it makes it harder to get into the space. But I'm stubborn and I love the space and I have a spiritual connection through it. And there are entities and beings that I am regularly in contact with, or I should really reframe it. It seems that I'm regularly in contact with, because again, we don't know what's really going on. We enter these spaces on DMT and they feel real, right? Like that's when we try to find a basis for reality, it always reduces to a feel. So people will say things like it feels more real than real. But given the complex nature of the human brain and the plethora of neural connections, as well as the inherent mystery of the brain and the mind and consciousness, it's hard to say how much of that is actually real, aside from being real enough to have an experience of. So kind of like Santa Claus has a certain type of reality too, but it's not real like the door that is in front of me, right? Or what we would say as real as the door in front of me. And so all this being said, it's how do we find the line of distinction to say whether or not these experiences are all in our head, or whether or not these experiences are actually, something real and from someplace, quote unquote, external to us. And that's another reason why, there's some anxiety around all of this, because what is the ontological standard that we want to apply to it? What do we want to say about it? And based on what we say, how are we going to justify that? Because we're very one-sided in how we think. There's a law for like laws of thought, thanks Aristotle, called the law of non-contradiction. So we're it might be part of like our part of our neural structuring and our cognitive function, but we're also conditioned to see things outside of the context of contradiction. So like if a contradiction comes up, it's bad. But the reason that might be a fallacy is that what if paradoxes are true and valid? And not all paradoxes. And so some of the paradoxes that don't fall into that category would be like quasi or pseudo paradoxes. What if that is, kind of the basis of reality? So all that being said, I feel like I'm starting to understand that based on the critical thought and assessment that I have, that there's a lot of good reasons to be careful with these molecules. Right? We're just in the nature of existence. We don't necessarily know anything about the nature of existence. We know enough that's practical for us, but not necessarily what is epistemically or ontologically apt, right? I feel like there's some other bases to cover, but I'm not gonna lie, my back is really hurting right now. I don't know what's going on, but I have a long day ahead. So yeah, we'll probably continue this one with regards to psychedelics at some point soon. I guess the other thing too that I can say is that I try to find stability in free fall, because I don't think that we know anything. And so there's a lot of times that we believe things because it provides us a sense of comfort. It provides us a safety blanket in the totality of this mystery. And because I see that at all points, it's hard for me to have faith or belief or anything like that that will help me to get through something like a psychedelic experience. I feel like it's just me to get myself through it, which goes back again to that trauma response, right? It has to be me and me alone. So, but thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Please give me a like, give me a subscribe. Please feel free to share too, especially if you know people that are into psychedelics or people that are also working on mindfully not giving a fuck. Let's kind of spread some of this out. And yeah, thanks for being patient with me. I feel like I didn't speak very well, but I'm just getting used to it and getting better at it. And I do this unedited so that it could be a little bit more authentic and sincere. So, but again, be good to you, be good to others, and have a good day. I'll talk to you next time. Peace.